Engineering conversation and innovation. This is Schulich Connects, proudly sponsored by TD Insurance.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the University of Calgary and the Schulich School of Engineering. It is wonderful to have you join us here this morning for our first Schulich Connects event of 2025, Engineering Tomorrow, AI, and the Smart City Revolution. My name is Anders Nygren. I am the Interim Dean of the Schulich School of Engineering, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. Before we get started, I would like to just take a moment to acknowledge the territories the lands that we are gathered on this morning, which are the traditional territories of the peoples of the Treaty 7 region here in southern Alberta. This includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Good Stoney First Nations. And the City of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. Artificial intelligence has fundamentally changed the way that communities operate. From intelligent traffic systems to energy-efficient infrastructure, data is now driving the decisions on making cities and towns more sustainable for the future. And this morning we have our panel of industry experts and University of Calgary researchers that will discuss how engineers and architects are using AI to transform the way we commute, the way we manage our infrastructure, and the way we design our communities. They will also delve into what's next in this ever-evolving technological world. So before I pass it over to the panel, just some quick logistics. I'm asking that you hold any questions that you might have during the panel discussion. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of the session, and during that portion we will have somebody with a microphone in the room so that if you want to ask a question, we'll bring a microphone to you. I'd now like to introduce you to Dr. Marianne Egermont, who is today's moderator on the far left of the panel here. Dr. Egermont is a teaching professor and also Associate Dean of Sustainability here at Schulich School of Engineering. Marianne leads the new Sustainable Systems Engineering undergraduate program that we started a couple of years ago now. Dr. Egermont also served on the board of the American Society of Engineering Education from 2014 to 2017, and she was inducted into the 2023 American Society of Engineering Education Hall of Fame. So I'd now like to pass things over to Marianne, who will introduce the rest of today's panel. Marianne, over to you.
Thank you, Anders. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us so early. Luckily, we didn't have to dig out of a meter of snow, so we all made it here safe and sound. I'm going to introduce you to our panel, and I'm very happy that we have also two people from architecture on the panel. So important when we're discussing cities as engineers that we collaborate with people that can also help us with creating better cities and creating better environments for the people that use these cities. So I'm going to start with our guest from the City of Calgary to my left, David Down. David Down is the Chief Urban Designer for Urban Design and Open Space at the City of Calgary. He's the former president of the Alberta Association of Architects and a fellow of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. He's also an adjunct professor at the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape at the University of Calgary, and he lectures on urban issues and professional practice. Welcome, David. Next to David, we have a brand new professor in the Sustainable Systems Engineering program, Saran Hashami. Dr. Hashami is an assistant professor, and her current focus is to develop and validate resilient metrics tailored to multi-layer urban networks, and I hope we find out what that means, including transportation, power grid resilience under widespread EV adoption. She's also has a research project on climate justice in urban adaptation and mitigation, and she has over 10 years of industry experience and has contributed to more than 50 infrastructure projects covering urban infrastructure systems design, optimization, and operation. Through a holistic approach, Dr. Hashami's work aims to address urban sustainability challenges and contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals across theory, practice, and policy. Welcome, Saran. Last but not least, we have Josh Tarrant. Josh is the Associate Dean of Research and Innovation at the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape at UC. He co-directs the Laboratory for Integrative Design and is also an academic co-lead for the Cities and Societies area of focus in UC's new Institute for Transdisciplinary Scholarship. Josh is dedicated to using design as a tool for positive change, ensuring that architecture serves the broader needs of society in an increasingly complex and interconnected world. Welcome, Josh. So we have a lot of questions. I don't think they were generated by AI, but we'll see when I read them out to our panel.
Just the answers.
Just the answers. The answers are ChatGPT, just so you're aware. So I'm going to start with our guest from the city. And David, I'm going to ask you this question. How are current AI technologies shaping smart cities? And how can we further advance their integration?
Okay, well, are we on? Okay, good. Thanks for the question, and thanks for inviting me today. I am honored to be here, to be part of this conversation. I think it's an important and timely conversation. I am an architect, as mentioned, but my work at the city, cities are very complex systems. I work with a lot of engineers, and cities really are about, and have been for a long time, about collection and analysis of data and then responding, or guiding the response, because most of the response in how we build cities actually comes from industry. We guide the response from industry. So that's certainly how artificial intelligence comes into this, is in that kind of data processing, data collection, data processing, and data analysis piece. And of course, we do that and have been doing that for many years in a whole variety of ways, and as was mentioned, from just generating data on vehicle trips, infrastructure capacity, infrastructure operations and maintenance, in a lot of, I would say, engineering aspects of the city. And that information goes into how we estimate what the needs are, and as we develop future neighborhoods and future parts of the city. But there's, of course, many, many more layers to that. And I think where AI is taking us now, beyond the obvious visualization piece, which we see a lot more in architecture, but beyond that is we're being asked now to incorporate more subjective aspects into everything we do at the city, such as diversity and inclusivity. We're being asked to respond more closely to how the public would like to see their city built, and I think AI is giving us the ability to kind of collect and process these inputs more broadly and more efficiently. I would say that, I think part of the question is how can we further advance their integration. I think that advancing the integration of these into the way we work at the city is going to be dependent on how closely we work with institutions like this and with SAPL, because I think there's a lot of really interesting work being done, but we don't have a really clear channel. I mean, we have some channels, Barry, but we don't have a really clear channel, I think, on how new thinking about city building and AI, how that works its way into the policy making at the city. And it really is about how we can influence the policymakers, because it is the policy that guides industry, and it's industry that actually delivers the city on the ground. So I see that still as not so much a gap as just not a clear path from research and new thinking coming out of research, and how we impact the way we build cities. I think some brilliant commentator said that with these transformational technologies, we tend to over-respond in the short term and underestimate the long term. And maybe a little bit of that is happening here, because cities are really long-term builds, and they're slow to change, and Industry needs to change, and industry is often slow to change because they like to keep doing things. And I'm talking here about development and building and that kind of thing. They like to do things the way they've done them before. So I think that we really need to be thinking about the kind of course of change over a long period of time, and not over-respond in the short term, but really think about how we're responding in the long term, what we want our long-term city response to be. Is that a rambling answer to your question, Maria?
Fantastic. Suran, your thoughts on this question?
Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Marianne, for the introduction and for having me on this panel. I'm really glad that David brings up the issue of not having a clear channel to build up those collaborations. That's actually something that us as researchers also have been thinking about, because fighting these smart city challenges and more sustainable transitions within cities needs collaboration between all academic, industry, and public sectors. So earlier this week, we actually had a workshop or pre-workshop on working on a recent connector grant that we have at the University of Calgary, and it aims to actually build a hub for sustainable smart cities research. And the goal is to actually bring together all these stakeholders together. So please reach out to me if you would like to be involved. And we have more events to come. Just a note on that. And one more thing that I would like to add is about the smart city term itself, because there's a lot of debate around it that if we should be using smart city term for the purpose that we have, because the goal is to make our cities and communities more vibrant and more livable, but labeling it with a word that's more like tech-centered and doesn't have a clear definition. I think, like, based on this, we need to stay open-minded about the term that we're trying to use and we're trying to push for. That's it for now.
Okay. Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah, and again, thanks to everybody and the organizers for having me here. It's really great to be on a panel with you all. The thought that comes to mind with this is I really appreciate the idea that we want to have a clearer pipeline for the production of policy, but also I think that there's a lot of discussion around AI that treats it like a tool, when really AI operates much more like an agent. And in the context of cities, when we think about agencies, we think about bureaucratic agencies that help make things happen. But I think also we think about our own citizenry, each of us having agency in producing and constituting what a city is. So when we think about AI built into that context, all of a sudden we have the agency or the ability now to process and turn around data in a much more profound way. And I think framing it in terms of AI as something that's separate or emerging, or something that we can kind of get our heads wrapped around, or to even take like a cautious or careful, intentional approach, may be misunderstanding some of the pervasiveness that's already there. And to really think in a radically new way that participates and plays with the technology and experiments with it, as opposed to sort of thinking about it being offline and separate before bringing it on. In a sense, it's already here and it's already doing really transformative things. We see that in architectural education. I'm sure we see it in a variety of contexts. There's a kind of leapfrogging where all of a sudden people with very little expertise can do amazing things. And it supplants a lot of traditional labor markets and job roles, But at the same time, I think it brings up a lot of new opportunities to think about how to individually operate within a city and participate with these new technologies. And yeah, hopefully have a better way of managing just the massive amount of information and resources and discussions that are happening in the context of cities and regions in ways that will be difficult for sure, but also fundamentally new and gives us a really new way to think about doing and operating and living in cities.
Thank you, Josh. I think I'm going to stay with you for the next question. You mentioned people having access to these tools and being able to do amazing things. So my question is, what ethical and moral challenges arise when implementing AI in smart cities? And how can we ensure that these technologies remain accessible for all citizens?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. Yeah, the one about ethics is tricky. I think I would just say that it opens up a new realm for ethics. I mean, I personally operate with the idea that ethics are not absolute, but they're contingent and they sort of arise out of social constructs. So that's a challenging thing to sort of deal with there. But the second part of the question is maybe where I would start, and it has to do with, privacy and access. The idea of accessibility to technologies like AI really has to do with one, maybe to build on an earlier comment about agency. There's not a lot of agency without access, and the ability to, transform or author the world around you. But that comes with an ethical deal in itself, which is to say that if you're interested in participating in transforming the world, you are also interested in being transformed. So ideas like autonomy, the discrete boundary around your own identity or multiple identities, those things really get called into question. And I would just say that I think this is where indigenous ways of knowing, I think, could be really fundamental. Understanding how to operate in a good way, understanding, maybe even a broader conceptual lens around the land or the foundations upon which we operate through, and operating in a way that's conscious of circular ecosystems and closed systems may actually be really, really, really crucial. But doing in a way where we know that we can't anticipate the outcomes, but just trying to operate in a way that is not just self-interested, but beneficial, and understanding there's going to be a lot of impacts to putting information into those systems.
Saran, your thoughts? I know you do work in this space. So.
Yeah, I actually have a lot to say on this, but I'll stick to a few. So yeah, definitely there are many challenges in terms of like equity, accessibility, transparency, and as Josh mentioned, privacy issues with AI, because it deals with mass amount of data. So one main challenge could be that like AI is not neutral, and it reflects the biases of its developers. So if the developers aren't diverse and have biases, then it shows in the algorithms that they develop. And there are lots of examples and evidence on that. Also, there are also algorithmic biases, because AI works by training some sort of data set. And if the data set is biased, then the AI is going to be reinforcing some of those inequalities and disparities in the data. That's another main concern. And if we're dealing with real-time decision-making and we're collecting data from people, so we're using some digital tools or technology, there comes the issue of digital divide, because not everyone have access to those devices and to those technologies. So then if we design our city services based on those data, then we are basically only serving people who are basically having access to those technologies, and we are leaving behind the elderly or low-income or marginal communities. Another main concern that I have through AI is like over-reliance on AI. So I think we shouldn't let AI to make decisions for us, but it should be only supporting human decision making. So if we like let AI make all the decisions, we've seen like evidence of multiple fatal accidents by Tesla autopilot system, which is AI driven, and it's just simply detects and analyzes the object in a wrong way, and it results in fatal accidents. There's also a famous moral dilemma with autonomous vehicles, because my background is in transportation, so I've come across this a lot, and it's that when, for example, an autonomous vehicle faces a no-win scenario, let's say a kid runs across the street and then the AV has to either hit the kid or swerve and hit the wall and harm the passenger. So how these decisions should be made, whose responsibility, or how should be decided whose life is more valuable to save? So these are a lot of moral and ethical questions and debates around that. Josh mentioned some privacy and surveillance issues with the data collection as well, and we have issues with data storage and management. We have failed smart city projects. You might have heard of the Sidewalk Toronto project that was simply failed because there was a backlash from community about the concerns around data management. So there's a lot to be thought about in terms of using AI in developing smart cities, and it has to be done in the planning and design processes. So they are not afterthoughts, because some of the potential damages are not reversible. So I'm glad that we are with city planners here.
I mean, it does seem really interesting. I mean, there seems to be a pretty clear friction or contradiction or tension between saying, you know, there's biases in these things, but we want to still have humans making decisions who are inherently biased, or that there may even be things that you wouldn't want human bias to be making decisions about, and it's, you know, you could algorithmically offload those more difficult things. So yeah,
that's also a challenge. Yeah.
David. Throwing you in the deep end here.
Well, I guess from the point of view of cities that really share these concerns, and city staff that are charged by council with delivering highest quality outcomes in everything we do. I mean, a city is a service organization, so we're charged with delivering high quality of service, high quality outcomes to everyone equally. And that's a very difficult thing to measure, a very difficult thing to know that we're doing it well or not. I think that we have all of the same questions, and we're being questioned constantly on whose data we're collecting, whose opinion we're responding to, whose perception of the correct path should be guiding the way we go, how we collect that information, how we process and analyze that information. Are we covering all populations? Are we hearing from those that have less access to the tools that provide us with the information? All of that we're looking at constantly. And I mean, you've all probably been aware of controversial aspects of the city in recent years where engagement has been criticized. These tools are allowing us new ways of engagement and greater engagement, but they're still not guaranteeing that we're engaging with absolutely everybody, and that's one of the challenges that we have to deal with. So the availability of technologies is a big part of the problem, and then how they're being used and for whose benefit, and is everyone being served equally. For my own team's work, and I think this is interesting as a bit of a rabbit hole, in this age where if something can't be measured, it doesn't matter, we were asked to measure the quality of design and communicate design quality at the City of Calgary. Well, of course, those of us in design think this is a crazy fool's errand, but we were charged by council with doing this so that we could put a metric on the quality of development applications that were coming into the city and tell people whether they were scoring high or scoring low, and that would be part of the design conversation, and we would get better outcomes in the end. We asked ourselves, who gets to decide what a good design is? Who gets to decide what a good quality built environment is? Is it just us? Is it just us in my tiny group, or is it just us with a few city staff? So we developed a perception survey, which went to about, I think, just under 1,000 people, and they were all professionals from various groups or community groups or city staff. And the perception of good design or good urban planning or good urban design varied wildly, even within the professional groups. So even within architects, there was no agreement as to what good design was. So we had to develop a metric that was based purely on principle level analysis of everything we saw. And still we're not sure whether we're covering any kind of broad perception. And yet we still do this. Thousands of applications get graded against this, and we report to council on the quality of design, and we really don't have a good sense of whose perception we're illustrating through this. And if anybody watched the Glenmore Landing case at council, you know that even though city planning and industry felt that this was an excellent place for high density, transit supported, provide many more homes for many people, help to deal with the housing availability crisis, all of the people in those surrounding neighborhoods thought that this was the end of the world. So how do we come to a place where we can advance council's objectives of solving problems like housing availability and do it in a way that doesn't anger half the population? So AI will help us with that and is helping us with that, but I think we have to be careful who we're talking to, how the data is used, and I don't know that we'll ever get away from that inherent bias. Maybe that's something AI can work on, but it's a huge issue, and so we have these new tools, but we're never going to get away from that kind of human factor in the decision making, I don't think. Without coming to something very generic, which is kind of what we had tried to do with our project. And ultimately, it is another tool, but it's not, I don't think, a particularly representative tool. So, sorry, that was a long rabbit hole.
No, I love it. That leads me nicely into my last question. I'm starting to see signage in the back, so we're going to squeeze in one more question. Calgary is the size of a small country, in my opinion. I came from the Netherlands, and Calgary fits into Holland maybe 4 times or something. So in what way, I'm going back to Josh, in what way can AI and industry members collaborate to reduce the environmental footprint of cities while meeting demands of urban growth? Any thoughts on that question?
This question seems a lot easier than the political human one. There's a lot of really interesting companies born out of research partnerships that are doing amazing things, ranging from using AI in material science to digital and robotic fabrication. A lot of 3D printing, new materials. Automating construction processes, transforming the construction industry. There's a whole range in which AI is being deployed against the vast amount of processes and interactions that are out there. And to be able to process that scale of information, and instead of looking at it and saying, well, it's always been done this way, and it's been done at this scale, and therefore we should continue to do it in that way. It's able to see, a a much more diverse and precise set of challenges. So the example I would bring out there is a company called AI Build. I think they're operating somewhere, maybe in the UK. They use AI within advanced machining processes so that the precision between what a digital model of something is and what a machine is trying to produce from that is able to, in real time, sense the material behaviors and the machining degradation in real time to the point where you can get like an absolutely precise piece of output that matches the model and the performance that virtually to what's in real life. So I think that there's a lot of transformation in the construction industry and the manufacturing industry, material science, that really will be able to help us create a higher performing built environment that does things that we just weren't able to access before with our existing technologies.
Fantastic. Saran, I'm going to give you a minute, and David also a minute.
So on the same question, I would say one of the important powers of AI is its like predictive analysis power, and that's something that can be used in many different ways to reduce a carbon footprint in cities and improve sustainability, for example, for like smart mobility solutions or smart energy demand management solutions. We can use the predictive analytics by AI. And one more thing could be using AI to design, for example, incentive structures to make some behavioral change in terms of somehow reducing the demands for some resources. And I think that AI power in terms of analyzing huge data sets to design those incentives would be helpful.
1 minute. In cities, we do a lot of predictive modeling. You know, as we say, we model transportation systems, we model infrastructure systems. We know the kinds of things that could be done to reduce the carbon footprint of the city overall. But I love the idea of predictive incentives that AI could help to create, because we need to incentivize the public to accept change. We need to help industry understand as quickly as possible some of the technologies that are available to help implement change. I think it's that broader understanding of how we're all going to change in order to create a city that has a smaller carbon footprint that people aren't willing to accept yet. And this is that kind of short-term versus long-term thing. You can't change a city overnight. It's a lot of small pieces, and I think AI can help to maybe tell us what are the kind of is maybe the best timeline, the best pieces to work on first to help generate those behavioral changes and those mindset changes and those industry changes that we need. Because I think we already know the kinds of things, but it's difficult for the city of Calgary, for example, because it's filled with young engineers just out of this school and other schools, young architects, young planners that are all full of ideas and energy and have a lot of the tools. But they have a job convincing, as I said before, the policymakers and convincing the public of how this change can be implemented. So let's hope that AI can maybe help provide those tools.
Fantastic. I think it's over to our audience for questions. Is that right, Joe? Joe has the mic. Okay. So we welcome your questions at this point.
Hi, I'm Tom Keenan from Sapple. I am so glad you brought up the self-driving car thing because, by way of recap, Mercedes said, if there's going to be an accident, it's inevitable, we're going to save our driver. And their lawyer, this was in 2017, their lawyer said, well, that makes sense. We have a relationship with the driver. But here's the engineering angle on that. What Mercedes ultimately said was, we know we can save the driver. We know all the internal systems in the car. That child who ran in front of it we don't know what's going on there. That it may be inevitable that child's going to die. Do you think we should hold off on self-driving trucks and flying cars and stuff until the AI is able to sense the entire environment, including whether that child can be saved?
Yeah, I go with the later. I think there's a lot of infrastructure needed to be able to have that complete surveillance around the AV, and also there are other algorithms. We don't have to leave the decision making to AI. We had a research last year during my postdoc with Dr. Ketan, and we developed an algorithm for AV decision making, which doesn't use AI. It's totally decentralized in the vehicle, it works based on a negotiation mechanism around the vehicle. So there are other approaches that needs less data and less reliance on data. I think that might be the way to go until we have that full reliance and full reliability of the data. I didn't get the question.
Should we stop AI driving until we get that?
I wouldn't ride one until we don't have the infrastructure, I would say. I can't speak for anyone else.
I mean, the question reminds me of James Derderian has done a lot of research on military technologies, over the years. And the philosophy, at least 20 years ago, of the American military, especially when it was going into Iraq, was total spectral domination. And it seems like what you're saying is until there's total spectral domination that we shouldn't have these things. But I don't really want total spectral domination. Even philosophically, I don't think it's really possible. So maybe that's what's embedded in the question. The world's a very weird and unknowable place. I wouldn't want technologies that sort of drive it into an over-limited condition.
At the city, we just want everyone out of the cars. We don't want anybody driving the cars, AI or otherwise.
Well, and with tariffs, no one will be making cars anymore.
Right. Solve the problem.
Really enjoyed the conversation today. It seems that we're going through a lot of churn as a city. And what I was wondering is, have we had a chance to have a common vision of what we want our city to look like? Can AI play a role in that? Because it seems to me we seem to be in a lot of battles in a lot of different fronts.
I guess that's for me to start, but and maybe I did talk about this a little bit. I mean, cities are complex, and they're very siloed places still by their nature, with various interest groups within cities working on their particular problems with particular objectives, and not always sharing them throughout the city. So I think a shared vision of what we want the city to be has to start internally. That whole perception piece that I noted, I mean, we all may have a slightly different perception of what that perfect city vision is. I think we need to actually look at what other cities are doing as well, because I think there's, as I mentioned before, I mean, we're struggling and going 1,000 miles an hour trying to keep up with this right now and trying to estimate, maybe overestimate what the impacts are going to be, but we're not necessarily talking to other cities, and every city is doing this. So the more we understand what other cities are doing, what other disciplines are doing, and within the city, what other departments are doing, the more we come up with this shared perception of what the vision is. I don't think one city could do it alone, because the technology is changing everywhere, kind of all at once. And I think there's new tools arriving all at once, and let's try to understand the best tools that we have in order to create this vision. But I'm skeptical that we could ever come up with a perfect vision that suits everyone everywhere all at once anyway, but it's certainly worth a try. Cities throughout history have tried to come up with visions, and those last a while, and then something changes and opinions change. And it's certainly, as we go through this time of a transformation in technology again, it is worth trying to understand how that can create for us the better city, which is what we're doing here. But again, it involves a lot of people and a lot of thinking and a lot of understanding what the tools can do.
So I was of that view a few years ago. I had a chance to be one of the fellows chosen to participate in this Energy Futures Lab. And it was a concept that had come out of Sweden, and there was 40 fellows, and we were all from different walks of life. And I was sitting there at the start of it going, there is no way we're going to come up with a common vision of an energy future. And lo and behold, we did. And it was shocking to me. So we had First Nations, we had people from the city, we had industry, we had tech companies. I think we've got to start to have those dialogues where we value all of the opinions and have this diverse group at the table to start this conversation, because I'm deathly afraid that if we don't start to, we'll continue to go off on all these tangents and create more of this fighting, and we'll never get anywhere. And the Energy Futures Lab still continues, the fellows change, and so it may be a model that will allow us to start to have the conversation so that we can clearly articulate with AI. I'm a big believer on social justice issues. How do we create a city that works for everyone?
Thank you for that. I'm getting lots of signs sort of all around me, so I think that's a beautiful place to stop on that note. And I'll hand it back to Anders. Let's thank Josh, Saran, and David for this engaging conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to this Schulich Connects, proudly sponsored by TD Insurance. We'll see you next time.